Broadly speaking, there are two types of containers that house the information that you and I will work with and collaborate on in SharePoint. The first is called a library, and the second is a list. In a library, each and every item is actually a file that's stored in SQL Server. And in a list, each and every item is more like a row in an Excel spreadsheet that's stored in a table, also in SQL. Let's take a look at how we'll work with libraries in SharePoint. Our Documents link here in the Quick Launch takes us to our Documents library. And here we are. We can see a list of documents, and if I want to look at a particular document, I can click here to open it, but that's not what we're going to look at right now. Let's see how this library works. This list is sorted in alphabetical order, but if I wanted to sort it by when it was modified, I can click once to sort it from oldest to newest, and click again in order to sort it in descending order. In the same way, I can sort it by who modified it, and then I can return and sort it again in alphabetical order by name. So I can easily work with the library by sorting. I can also filter, just like I could in an Excel table. I can click the drop-down and say, just show me the files that were modified last by Gerald, our CEO. And there they are, and I can close this. I can also return and say, no, now I want to clear all the filters and I want to see everybody again, and everybody's back. And if there's been a change from the way this view originally looked, this presentation of my information, then two things will be true. One is there'll be a sort or a filter button showing on one of my headings, and the other is I'll have the opportunity to save this view so that I don't have to sort it in this particular way again or filter it in this particular fashion. I can just come back and change to a different view. For example, there's a view called By Type that was created for this document library, and when I click, I'll see a different presentation that's grouped by file extension. If I want to return to the default All Documents view that was created by SharePoint when this library was created, I simply click All Documents, and we switch back to this view again. When I'm actually in the library, I have a ribbon with two tabs on it that have to do with the library. So if I click the Files tab, what I'll see is commands that allow me to work with one or more selected files. Right now, most of them aren't enabled, but if I choose any one file just by selecting it, notice that this entire ribbon comes to life. This is where I'll go to create a new document. I can come here to upload documents. Note that you can create a new folder here. I don't advise it. Please don't begin by creating folders in SharePoint until we've talked about metadata, which comes a little bit later in this course, because many of the reasons that you might think you need folders aren't valid reasons in SharePoint. There are better ways to do it. This is where I can edit a document, and I might be required to check it out first. We'll talk more about that. I can change the document's properties. I can share it with someone. I can say I'd like to be notified if there's a change to the document, and I can launch a workflow if there is one that works with this document. We'll be looking at all of these commands later on in the course. So on the Files tab, all of the commands that have to do with one or more selected files. Here, on the Library tab, these are the commands that have to do with the library. So this is where I could create a new view. I can switch to a quick edit view that's very much like Excel. This is what it looks like. So here we're seeing our library in a view that looks a lot more like Excel and that you can work with as you would work with Excel. I'm going to go back to library and I'm going to switch back to the regular view. That looks good. I can modify views and change views here. I can add new columns of data, new information about these files if I wish. I can email a link to the library. I can connect this library to Outlook. Not something that we'll normally do with libraries, but we can talk about that later on in the course. I can export this list to Excel, so if I want to know all of the documents that I have, I can click here and actually get an Excel spreadsheet. And then over on the right, we have the ability to edit the library and to change the settings of this library. There are lots of settings that control how a library looks. If I just click here, you'll see that we have a raft of settings here. Each of these is a link to even more choices about how this particular library will look, whether or not it will be displayed on the quick launch, and so on. And here are the columns in our library, and down below are two views, all documents and by type. So lots of settings that are available to us simply by going to the Library tab and saying that we'd like to change our library settings. We'll see that later on in the course as well. When I want to hide the ribbon again, I simply choose Browse, and the files in the Library tab are put away so that they don't take up space on the screen. So this is how we'll work in every single SharePoint library. You'll be able to sort, you'll be able to filter, you'll be able then to go to the ribbon and affect one or more selected files. or change the settings for the library as a whole. Those are the basics of a SharePoint library.